Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're thrilled to welcome you this morning to our presentation on life cycle assessments. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll give everybody just a moment to get settled. And while I'm doing that, I'll just say that hello, my name is Corinne Hansen, the VP of Sustainability here at Greenplaces. Joining me is Shamata Chowdhury, COO and Head of Methodology at ClimatePoint. Welcome, Shamata. Today, we're going to walk you through life cycle assessments, what they are, why they matter, how they connect to your greenhouse gas emissions reporting, and how Greenplaces and ClimatePoint can help you actually put those to work. Um, as I mentioned, we're just going to give everybody a couple more minutes to hop on the line. And while we're doing that, just go ahead and familiarize yourself a little bit if you aren't already ready with the black bar that should be at the base of your Zoom screen. We're predominantly going to be using the Q&A feature here. For me, it shows up in the More bar. If for some reason that's not working or it's more convenient for you to use the chat, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. I also would welcome everyone to just drop a line, say their name, introduce themselves, where they're coming from, whether it's your organization or where geographically you're joining from. The last thing I'll sort of say on the admin side as we give everyone a second to join and settle in is that this presentation is a bit long. I will do my very best to move us through at a pace to leave us a good chunk of time, at least 10 or 15 minutes or so at the end here to do a bit of a Q&A. We did receive a couple of questions before the session today, so we'll go through those. But if you do have additional questions, again, please navigate to the Q&A box on your black bar or to the chat function and post your questions there. And if you do that over the course of the presentation today, then we'll make sure we try to get to those at the end. There will be a couple of polls. Those will pop up. Feel free to answer those. We'll talk through them in a little bit of detail, but we definitely want to make sure this is a little bit more interactive. I'll try not to death by presentation here. And the last thing I'll say is that there will be a bit of a demo at the end, so hang tight. We want to give you practical inputs, advice, recommendations about how to tackle LCAs. We'd like to hear from you the pain points that you're feeling, but we'd also like to show you what it is that we're doing and resources that we're using to make this possible. So with that, I'll kind of jump in here. We are really glad to have you here, whether you're new to LCAs or looking to deepen your existing practice. There should be something useful, ideally, for you in today's session, and if there isn't, we would love to hear your feedback. Again, we'll leave time at the end for the Q&A, so either hold your questions, drop them in the chat as we go. But I'll start here with just a little bit of an introduction. I lead sustainability strategy and client services at Greenplaces. We help companies build credible data-driven sustainability programs with carbon accounting, greenhouse gas emissions really as the foundation of that data that leads to your sustainability strategy and ideally your decarbonization strategies. We also support reporting work. And I come to Greenplaces. I've been here about 3 years. Prior to that, I was running sustainability at SH Hotels and Resorts and on the board at Starwood Capital Group. And I've been in the sustainability space, first in politics and policy, and then in the private sector for about 15, 16 years at this point. And I would love to introduce Shamata here, Shamata Chowdhury. She brings a deep technical expertise in methodologies in LCAs, PCFs. We'll have her lead the more technical components of our discussion around LCAs today. And Shamata, I would love to have you just give a little bit of a deeper intro on yourself.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Corinne. Hi, everyone. It's very nice to be here. Just a little bit about me. I think that Corinne did a really good job of introducing me, but I'll tell you a little bit more. My name is Shamita. I am an architect and a circular economy practitioner. I've been the head of methodology and COO at ClimatePoint for a couple of years now. And at ClimatePoint, we've had the pleasure of working with a lot of different companies. I would say it's been been a little more than 100 now, doing LCAs. We've worked across 15 plus sectors across, say, about 20 countries. And through this journey, we've gone through the process of doing some extremely manual LCAs to developing software tools over time, which make our job a lot easier and a lot faster and streamlined. Um, yeah, so this is what I'm hoping to share with you today, and share with you what our struggles were, how we solved that, and see what you're going through and if we can help you solve some LCA problems along the way. So happy to be here, and yeah, let's get started.
Excellent. And Shamata and I will be passing back and forth a bit. Forgive me if it's a little bit clunky. We're doing some new navigation today. So, Shamata, also please feel free to interject if I'm covering something that we've previously discussed, cover. Um, and again, drop your questions, concerns in the chat as we're going through. So first, a little bit about our agenda, what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about why impact measurement is a strategic tool, not just a compliance exercise. Compliance has really gotten a big stage these days. What an LCA actually is, and some detail about the disparate components that go into that. What it covers beyond carbon, because it is indeed a wider tool beyond carbon. We'll talk about how greenhouse gas emissions are structured across scopes 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if 4 is new to you today, I'm excited to talk about that. How to think about decarbonization planning, especially as it relates to your LCAs. And finally, how Greenplaces and ClimatePoint can support your LCA work. Again, this presentation can also act as a leave behind. We'll send this out. Please get in touch if you want to learn more about working with either of us or just chatting through some problems that you have. We're happy to be a resource. So, first things first, why measure impact? We'll start here with the foundational question, why does this even matter in the first place? Both why do we think it's important that you do this, but also why might you be on this webinar in the first place, pursuing LCAs, trying to gain more data. And I think the short answer here is definitely that it's shifted from a nice to have to a competitive necessity. Both because it is a compliance tool at this point. There are requests out there for folks to submit LCA work, both in sort of like a more voluntary corporate engagement component, but also from a regulatory perspective, especially globally. But much more importantly, I think when done well, it does become a genuine tool for running your business much better. And the core message we want to get across here is that impact measurement goes beyond compliance. Yes, regulators are raising the bar, CSRD in Europe, increasing CDP pressure, et cetera. But the companies that we work with who get the most value from this work aren't just doing it to check a box. They're doing it to make better procurement decisions, identify where they're most exposed to carbon pricing risk, differentiate with customers, and attract investors who are increasingly sophisticated about what credible sustainability really looks like. So think of it like financial reporting. You don't just produce a P&L because the auditors require it. You do it because you use it to run the business. And ideally, LCAs are no different. You're using this information to really understand what it is that you're producing and what the inputs to it are. Okay, so who is an LCA for? And I believe, Shamata, forgive me if I'm wrong, but we're going to pass to you here and I'll clean up my notes here a sec.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So in our experience of working with just a variety of companies, we realize that impact measurement can be and is for everyone. We get a lot of questions saying, "Oh, we're too early. Do you think we should measure our impact?" Or we're really mature. How should we measure our impact? And the short answer is that everybody should do it. We worked with a lot of early stage companies where um, just by, again, keeping the analysis broad, using proxies to quantify your impact, using a bunch of different benchmarks, whether it's a competitive technology or a traditional technology that you're replacing, and creating scenarios to understand how you're doing with respect to your benchmark becomes a really important tool to deciding whether you're doing well or not. And then the more mature you get, you can get more specific and more accurate and back it up with a lot more data. There are, of course, a lot of different ISOs available out there for different types of sectors. But the baseline, which I really like, is the life cycle assessment, your ISO 1440 and 1444, do a pretty good job of telling you how to think about it. And I think we can get into a little more detail about how to do this. But the short answer is that everybody should do it and use it as a strategic tool. I would love to give you a couple of examples of how we've done this with a bunch of our clients, but maybe we can start with a short poll, just to understand what has been your experience with measuring impact. Um, have you done it before? Um, Please go for it and answer the poll.
Excellent. So I've never done an LCA before. I've considered an LCA, but I haven't completed one. I have had one LCA completed. I've had multiple LCAs completed. I conduct LCAs regularly and I'm very experienced. So we're trying to get a sense here of who all we're speaking with today beyond where you work and your titles and really what your experience with life cycle assessments is. So just give folks one more second to respond here. Okay, excellent. Okay, this is sort of what we anticipated, I think, right, Shamata? Never
Yeah.
got the essay done, sort of folks at the beginning stages. I think this makes sense.
Okay, perfect. So that means I can start from the basics. Amazing. Um, Perfect. So I'll start with the basics of what is a life cycle assessment. Those who've considered doing it, maybe this is something you already know, but let's go for it. So a life cycle assessment, and I'm just going to read it off the page here, is a systematic method for quantifying environmental impacts associated with all stages of a product or service's life cycle. I personally like to think of it as a way of thinking. It's a systematic method, but life cycle thinking is really what you have to get into. There's something called a system boundary, or the scope of what you're measuring here. So, and it really depends on what sector you're in. Are you producing a raw material that's going to be useful for a different industry, or are you producing a finished product? So, for example, if you're producing a raw material, you might want to do a cradle to gate analysis, which means starting from raw material extraction all the way to producing your raw material till the point it leaves the factory. Complete with packaging, and then it becomes a part of somebody else's supply chain. So that would be your cradle to gate analysis. And maybe if you're producing a finished product, then you would want to do a cradle to grave analysis, which intuitively means from when you're producing the product to when it reaches its end of life, it's been used fully. And cradle to cradle is, of course, a term which talks about the circular economy, where at the end of life, are you reusing it, are you recycling it, or are you disposing it? And that essentially is an LCA. It can come across as pretty complex sounding, but because we have so many different ISOs. But the important thing to remember is that the LCA is sort of the basis for how you think about all of these other different methodologies as well. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, over to you, Karan.
I want to contextualize a little bit too in talking about how these two pieces fit together. Um, Much more regularly, I'm speaking with clients and publicly about carbon emissions and greenhouse gas accounting. So I think it's helpful to ground ourselves in the pillars of sound carbon accounting and also the traditional methodologies, because obviously they fit together. And so when we think about what good data looks like and what a good carbon emissions report looks like, what a footprint looks like, we think about these key characteristics: relevance, completeness, consistency, transparency, and accuracy. And so when we look at those as the foundational pillars, what we're trying to get at here is really how to support the best possible methodologies given the data and capability that you have available, in addition to your organizational boundaries and what can be included and who owns what, that kind of thinking. But in essence, we get the question so often from clients, how do we decarbonize? What do we do? Whether it's, our scope 3 emissions or looking directly at direct emissions, it's very hard for us to give real tangible guidance about how to decarbonize and even how to clearly report and communicate efforts without this first component, sort of using the activity-based method, granular primary data. This is really the gold standard when it's available. And life cycle assessments, in addition to giving you a lot of information about the full suite of impacts of a product, do give you this core primary data. Of course, we can use estimates where necessary, but ideally we're getting closer and closer to having actionable insights based on the information that you really need. What are the core materials? What goes into the processing? And what is the total impact of your products? And so I'm going to have Shamita go a bit deeper on the methodologies here, but I just want to keep that context in mind.
Great. So I hope everyone's still with us, and please use the chat if you have any questions. But an example of the life cycle assessment thinking that I was talking about is the EPD methodology. Now, the EPD methodology, or the Environmental Product Declaration, is very commonly used in the construction sector. I don't know if any of you are in the construction sector, but I think from the attendees who had signed up, we could see a bunch of them were architects and working in the field. So we thought EPD would be pretty relevant here. Now, the EPD is, again, the gold standard of getting your impacts communicated in an extremely credible way. And an example of what you're seeing over here, so the EPD methodology from goes from A to D, where you'll have a very detailed description about what do you need to declare here. For example, your raw material extraction or your transportation, even down to your construction and installation. And you go to your use phase and you're talking about what is the energy that you're consuming, down to your end of life stage. So this is just an example of um, how structured and detailed this methodology is, but at the root of it is the life cycle thinking approach. And it goes beyond carbon. I know that we hear about carbon a lot in all the international discussions around impact, but really when we want to use LCA as not just a compliance tool, um, we want to talk about the air pollution impacts, for example. What is your particulate matter impact? What is the land use? What's your water use? So there is a host of impact categories that you can talk about, and you can see what the trade-off is. Are we just to decide whether you're doing well or not? Again, I would like to give some examples at some point about how we've used this with our different clients. So again, use the chat. Type in your questions, and I hope we can get more specific and deep dive a little more.
Okay, so from here, let's dive in a little bit to the emission scopes that we're talking about. And especially I want to introduce the concept of scope 4 for those who aren't already familiar. So, and forgive me if this is not news to any of you on the call here, but I think it's always good to level set. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol divides emissions into 3 scopes. And then there is this emerging 4th category. So scope 1, of course, is all of your direct emissions, anything from within your own control, think natural gas boilers, company vehicles, refrigerant leaks for HVAC systems. Scope 2 are your indirect emissions from purchase energy, your electricity consumption, that is technically generated off-site, but you're driving the demand. So the locus of control is within the company itself. This is usually the easiest to reduce through renewable energy procurement, RECs, PPAs, really good foundational history here of decarbonizing your scope 2 emissions. And quite conveniently, or not conveniently, depending on how you look at it, everything else tends to fall into scope 3. So this is everything else in your value chain, typically about 70 to 90% of most organizations' footprints. And that's consistent with our clients as well across many, many different industries. This includes your supply chain, employee and commuting, business travel, the products you sell, and how customers are using them, so product end of life. And so scope theory is really where LCAs become especially powerful. So they give you the granularity within those categories that corporate level greenhouse gas emissions accounting can't. And I'm going to have Shamita talk through scope four.
Yeah, thank you. Scope 4, I would say personally is my favorite category, only because while scope 1 to 3 can tend to feel very abstract about, okay, our product or service is generating X kgs of carbon equivalents. And you can often wonder, what does that mean? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And that's where scope 4 comes into the picture. Scope 4 typically are your avoided emissions, and you're comparing your product or service with a benchmark. Now, traditionally, what we've done is you can either compare it with a traditional technology that has existed for a really long time, or maybe it could be a competitor technology that you want to see, are you better or worse? And how can you improve? This is also the core of your decarbonization strategy. I want to give an example of a service model here, because a lot of times we also hear questions about, oh, we're a service-based company. Can we measure our carbon impact? And the answer to that is, again, yes, yes, you can. Um, so an example here is of a route optimization app. Now, a route optimization, like a route would not make any sense um, uh, unless you know what you're comparing it. So if you have a baseline route and you say, oh, we see some congestion here. What if we take this alternate route? This would be our increase in carbon or reduction in time versus a reduction in emissions versus increase in time. Those would be your scope 4 emissions. And again, in products, it's pretty simple. Just think of the new light bulbs that are coming out. Um, we used to use these halogen bulbs which used to consume a lot of electricity, but now we have a lot of very new technologies on the market which use next to no electricity. But the reason that they're good or bad is because we're able to compare them. So again, this becomes a really powerful tool for investors, for raising investment, or for speaking to your consumers about why they should buy your product, your positioning in the market. Um, yeah, so that's the newest one, scope 4. Don't forget that word.
I do think that scope four emissions are a pretty important component of decarbonization writ large too. We do really focus predominantly on scopes one, two, and three because we're looking at the physical inputs to your business, but we also need to be accounting for scope four emissions. There's not a methodology included in the greenhouse gas protocol, but understanding total impact does include understanding the emissions that you are not contributing to and producing products and services that contribute less to carbon emissions. And I raise that because I want to talk a little bit about the process of decarbonizing and how you might go about doing this, no matter what industry you are in. And what we do for clients is produce a lot of decarbonization plans and maps about how to get from your current footprint to your target. And this is purely just an example, but we have used some averages that we found within certain sectors, but also from our client base. And I'm not putting this up here because I want to talk about the specific details of what decarbonization levers result in what percentage of reductions. I'm purely putting this up as an example because the name of the game really here is about prioritization. And again, when you think about lifecycle assessments, I think they're a critical input to understanding how to prioritize different actions. So what we typically do is obviously start at 100% of your own emissions. That's your current carbon footprint baseline. And then we look at how to decarbonize your operations. Are you electrifying vehicles and equipment, improving building efficiency? We see about like a 30% reduction opportunity here. Again, extremely average. Take this data with a grain of salt. The reason we start with operations is that this is what's within your control. And that's how we typically recommend companies prioritize. Look at what you can do before you look at the hardest to achieve, even if the percentages might be more vast in other categories. You want to take the wins where you can get them. Then you want to look at policy changes. Do you have green leases, sustainable travel policies, flexible work, potentially another 21%, but again, something that's going to take longer to implement, and you'll need to be tracking data really accurately, and it's more challenging to do on that side. And then you're looking at supply chain switches, and often this is where the LCAs come in. Engaging suppliers to shift to lower carbon materials and logistics, roughly 19%. And for residual emissions that can't be eliminated, that's where we recommend high quality offsets and removals that fill the remaining gap. I won't get into this on this call, but a lot of debate around where offsets are appropriate, which reporting frameworks accept them. It's a complicated space. Again, something that we help clients navigate constantly. I have high hopes in the next decade or so we'll finally see some cleanup on that side, some unification instead of more and more chaos. But until that point, we're happy to help you navigate this. Another point on sort of common reduction strategies, I talked about this a little bit, sort of thinking through when you're looking at your own operations versus your supply chain. But I will say that we get questions often about customized actions. What are the levers we can pull? And what I will say about scope one and two is that there's consistent guidance here. The devil's in the details, figuring out exactly what you need to do to electrify your vehicles and building systems is really where the challenge comes in. But whether or not you should do that is much less of the question. Figuring out cost, looking at direct impact to your operations, what is the gain you're going to have, the ROI, all of that is really where the hard work comes in. But typically, you're looking at things like electrification, building efficiency, renewable energy procurement, as I previously mentioned, either through RECs or power purchase agreements, on-site solar or other generation, a much more viable option than folks think, and green lease provisions. So making sure that tenants and landlords are aligned on incentives on energy. If you're someone who leases, you know that this is definitely a massive problem and requires a fair bit of negotiation and engagement. Scope three is harder. I'll put it simply. It requires coordination beyond your own operations. You don't necessarily own every decision here. You are working with a multitude of stakeholders. And for that reason, the supplier engagement program problem is one that I get asked about constantly. What does that really look like? And in essence, a supplier engagement program, don't let anyone tell you differently, is asking your suppliers to measure and report their own emissions and to reduce them over time. There are many different levers you can pull here, equipping them with resources to reduce their emissions, giving them educational materials, working directly with them, applying measures within your own contracts about selection of suppliers or selections of materials, giving yourself a floor that you have to hit around quality of materials. You do that for every other component of your operations, so it stands to reason that it's possible to do here. 10 years ago, the question was availability of data and availability of materials. There's only so many things you can sub in. There's not available at the quantities that you need. This is less and less true today. Globally, there's so much innovation in the material space. And so there's a lot to capitalize on here. And if you look at the other categories, we're talking about less today. We're thinking about updated travel policies, flexible and hybrid work schedules to reduce commuting emissions. Data center and cloud procurement decisions increasingly matter as computing footprints grow, especially due to artificial intelligence. And so there's a lot that goes into this decision-making process. But again, I have to stress, you need to start with really good data. And I talked about these in some detail, so I won't go into this too much more. But I will again just stress that purchase electricity is the most controllable Scope 2 lever. Moving to 100% renewable energy, either through a PPA or by purchasing RECs, is highly achievable. It's a bigger ticket item for folks traditionally, but increasingly cost competitive. Um, and then business travel is often the largest Scope 3 category for a lot of our clients. And so starting at the policy lever here and then looking at alternatives, aligning with a preferred vendor for airlines if you have booking software, um, that's huge. And then on the investment side, this applies particularly to financial institutions. Continued divestment from high carbon sectors. And if you look at any of the IPCC reports or Project Drawdown, any of the heavy hitters in the space of decarbonization recommendations. This is sort of an undervalued, underserved lever, but we obviously need much more engagement on this side. So, how do Greenplaces and ClimatePoint actually support organizations through the process of collecting this data, understanding the impact, and making decisions? And I'm going to pass that over to Shamata.
Thank you. Yeah, so before we dive into this, I think I want to take just a minute to talk about how LCAs traditionally are, because I think it's important for us to understand what goes into producing an LCA before we talk about how we make it better. So, for all those who have experience with LCAs, and to those who are new to it, LCAs I feel like are, in my humble opinion, very simple math. You're taking all the activities of your value chain and you're attaching emissions to it. It sounds really simple. And you can also do it on an Excel sheet. But and from the days when we tried to do it on an Excel sheet, the issue with that is, just like Karin said, you require really good data. Uh, it takes a really long time to collect that data. It takes a really long time to attach the right emissions. And this entire process can go anywhere from like 4 to 6 months and even more if you traditionally try to do it with an Excel software, as once upon a time I used to do. And the issue with that is that you end up spending so much time and so much effort just quantifying your impact that the actionable insights that you want to derive from that analysis and to see how you can apply those insights to your business in a way that it makes business sense for you. It's already too late by the time you reach there. It's like 6 months into it, everything in your production has kind of changed. That recipe has changed. And by the time you have that really lengthy academic 50-page document called lifecycle assessment, it's already too late and it doesn't apply anymore. And that's why it ends up being a compliance tool. Whereas we want it to be a strategic business decision-making tool. So what we've done over time now is use technology and leverage technology to make this entire process a lot easier. So one of the things that our extremely nerdy team of analysts has done is streamline the data collection. So, and I'm going to walk you through how we do this as well through a demo in a bit. But basically, we've streamlined how we collect the data and made it super fast. Um, and because we make this quantification super fast, we're able to give you a lot of actionable insights on what are the simple things that you can do tomorrow to reduce your impact. We've also made sure that aligning this with different ISOs and your supplier data becomes pretty seamless. And at the end of the day, you want a credible report. And we've made that process of auditing this report super simple as well, so that when you talk about, when you've put in all of this effort into quantifying your impact and you go into the market and say, these are our emissions, you can be very sure that those are your emissions, and you are indeed doing better or worse than what the market is used to right now. So that's a little bit about how we would support you with our LCA tools. Um, and if we can go to the next slide. Um, and thanks to where technology is at in the world, we've also been leveraging a lot of AI now. And what was initially a 6 month process became a 2 week process and is now actually something that we can do in a matter of hours. And we say 1 to 2 weeks here because we add in that extra layer of like credibility with your analyst support and your third party verification. But we really managed to make this whole process so much faster. One of the ways we're also leveraging AI is that the R&D that we would spend so many weeks doing on figuring out decarbonization strategies has become really, really quick. Um, Another really important feature is dynamic reporting because, again, you come up with this traditional LCAs would give you this lengthy document, and you would find that in another 3 years, you need to do this process all over again because that's what the compliance requires. And then you have to take on this 4 to 6 month exercise again. And now you just need to go to the report, edit what exists, and it becomes really, really simple. Um, Another thing that we feel really proud about is the fact that our LCAs are forward-looking, which essentially means that you're not looking back in time to say this is what we used to do. You're looking forward in time to say that this is the roadmap that we have for our company. This is our decarbonization strategy. And combined with our sales projections, this is the impact or it depends on whether you're talking about product or organizational footprint, but you're basically saying that this is the impact that we're going to achieve over time as well, which makes your product or service or organization very attractive to investors. Um, yeah, we've built out some very cool tools that we're also very excited to show you. Things like a a bill of materials or a BOM builder, as we call it, which can where you can just upload a bill of materials onto our platform and very quickly it'll parse it and turn it into an LCA format. We have a deep research module, which makes sure we're not just relying on databases, but we're also going into research papers and what's available on the World Wide Web. Um, and again, very new but very cool feature. My personal favorite is the data quality review module, which will tell you, oh, you've put together this life cycle assessment, but how credible is the data that's gone into it? Is it geographically accurate? Is it technologically accurate? Like, what's the accuracy of the data? How are you doing that? And gives you a rating for it. Um, yeah, so I I think we're gonna go into a little bit of a poll again. Corinne, do you wanna? Yeah, great.
Yep. Yeah, so the poll should pop up a new screen. Which of the following stakeholder groups most often request life cycle assessment information in your organization? Um, Select all that apply. Sorry, this is supposed to be from your organization. And again, really trying to get a sense of who we have on the call and why folks are looking to conduct life cycle assessments and where this information is going. So in addition to making sure you get really good data, how does it need to be translated for the appropriate audiences? So sustainability and ESG teams, product development and R&D teams, so your procurement team, executive leadership, would love to see that, or external stakeholder requests or other. We could talk through other during the Q&A section as well. So go ahead and vote. We'll give folks just another 10 seconds or so and then close out the poll. All right. Predominantly from sustainability and ESG teams. Uh, and you've made my dreams come true, executive leadership. So really, I would love to talk through that in the Q&A and just sort of understand a little bit more what the requests look like and what the intent is. Especially from executive leadership, I think, looking for uh, the package of data that they need to see in addition to LCA, traditional metrics, but sort of is there a financial component that needs to be included there? What else needs to be layered on to the decision-making process? Um, Essentially, we're working together to give you a complete picture of your carbon emission story and give you these actionable insights. And so we're moving from collecting data and making that your full-time job to giving you data so that you can produce those actionable insights and make decisions. Ideally, the sustainability individuals at companies, whether you've been voluntold to do that work or you are a sustainability professional who's been doing this for a long time, um, it shouldn't be your whole job to be collecting data and doing the analytics. That doesn't really get us anywhere. And so we've been, I think, stuck in a churn of that application for a minute now. And so I'll pass to Shamata to walk us through a bit of a demo here.
All right. Excited to give you guys a demo of what we've been working on. The AI tool is brand new, and we're still in the process of building it and making it even better. But here we go. Okay, so everybody can see my screen. Give me a thumbs up. Yeah. Okay, great. All right. I'll walk you through what we have here. I already started a little bit of the process, but essentially I'll give you a little bit of a background of what I did before. Basically, you start with a little bit of your company information. We came up with a random name for the company here. We give it a random website name. In your case, please apply your own website and your company information. We talk a little bit about the size of the company, and we'll talk about the product. So this is the information that we essentially start with. Today, we're going to be looking at fire clay tile. Um, and you start with uploading just a spec sheet. So nothing elaborate, nothing fancy, just upload a spec sheet of the product that you want to analyze. Um, and the AI tool uses prompts you with all the information that you might want to fill out, and it gives recommendations of how you should do the LCA. So essentially, you don't need an LCA expert. The software does that for you now. In our case, it's filled out what the goal of the LCA is, and you can tweak it yourself. You can add some things to it. It suggests what system boundary you should go for. I'm going for a cradle to gate, just to show if you're producing a raw material, for example, or a finished product, like what that could look like. I'm going to confirm and continue. Um, it will tell you what your functional unit should be. Now, for those of you who don't know, functional unit is the base metric that you're going to be quantifying in your life cycle assessment. So in this case, since we're looking at a tile, you could look at kilograms of tiles, you could look at a number of tiles, but the most useful way of measuring flooring is area. So we've gone for meter square over here, and this is what will make it comparable to any other product out there, right? We have the deep research module here, which you can enable, which will go even deeper and get you more credible sources available on the internet for research. Um, but I'm going to skip that for now because it takes a little longer to process. So we've put meter square here as the functional unit, and we're going to continue. Um, Now the AI tool already suggests what benchmark you can go for. So again, the primary benchmark that you can go for is, say, a traditional technology. In this case, we're comparing it to a porcelain tile or a glazed ceramic tile. You can also see other competitor products that the AI tool finds for you and says, in your industry, here are, say, three companies that are doing similar work. Do you want to compare yourself to them? And traditionally, finding this benchmark data can be really tedious. And especially as an LCA analyst, we end up spending so much of our time looking at what the benchmark is comprised of. Where is it being sourced from? Um, because we're not in contact with the suppliers or that company to get credible information. So it's a lot of burden on the analyst or you as a company to be looking for this information. And again, this is where the deep research module becomes pretty handy, where it will sort of do that for you. And it's nice that we now have AI to do this for us. You choose the impact categories next of what kind of impact you would want to see at the end of this analysis. We have a bunch of different KPIs which you can choose from. For now, I'm choosing carbon footprint, water, and energy, but of course, and the AI also suggests what impact categories might be very relevant to you. Um, I'll give you an example of a construction company that I was working with. And for the longest time, I thought carbon and energy were the most important impact KPIs. But I found out, thanks to AI, that ecotoxicity was one of the metrics I should have been looking at because in the research somewhere, this had been highlighted as a metric that was often overlooked. So this was something new and interesting for us as well. So we'll continue. Um, the next thing is the bill of materials builder. Now, this is typically what makes traditional LCAs so long and tedious to do because collecting that bill of materials data has been it's been quite tiresome. It can take weeks and weeks, but we have a pretty simple template which you can download. Um, and you can fill out your bill of materials here. It assists you. I've already downloaded or like we've already tried filling it out for the purpose of this demo today, and I can perhaps show you what that would look like. Let's look at this. Let's open it up. Let me know if you can still see my screen. Can you see this?
I can still see your screen. I can't see a window opening.
Can you see the bill of materials? The sheet, I'm sharing an Excel sheet. Can you
I
see?
can't see the Excel sheet, no.
Oh, okay. Sorry, my bad. Okay. For technical. Yeah, I'm just okay, never mind. We'll share this with you later, but and you can check it out as well when you check out the tool. But essentially it's a simple Excel sheet where you can fill out what materials, what quantity, and where did you source them from. And it's as simple as that. It can also read the existing format in which you might already have your bill of materials. And what we get is a pretty simple looking bill of materials, which has five main components here. But if you actually open it up, it's nested. So if you're saying we have one component, but it has several subcomponents, all the background data, as we call it in an LCA, can also be listed. And the number of like nests that we can create here is quite endless. So it really depends on how much detail you have. Again, this depends on how mature your organization is. Do you have a lot of data? Do you have a lot of supplier data? Or do you have just a base level data and whatever you have is good enough to start with? Um, and then you can proceed. Again, for the sake of this demo, we ended up uploading the same bill of materials for both benchmark and the primary product, just tweaking a few things here and there. And if you can see over here, we have a little data quality monitor which says, oh, poor quality data. Very understandable. This is a fictitious company. But if you look at it, you can see that here are the things that you need to be filling out. You need to be technologically representative. You need to be geographically accurate, temporally accurate. And your data source quality also needs to be high in order for this to be a high quality analysis. Um, and you can go in and fill out all of these details. Again, if this is your company and you're doing the LCA for your own product, this would not be a problem because you would have all of this information. And this also is what makes your analysis ISO compliant, but also really high in credibility for when you go for that third party verification. So again, we're going to continue. We ask you to write your sales projections here and your lifetime here. And this is a part of that forward-looking approach. Um, and based on this, we continue. And yeah, this is essentially nearly like the last process, and we're pretty much done. Um, these are your five life cycle stages that we're looking at. AI prompts you to say, "Hey, we've gone through the data you uploaded. Here are the main things that we feel you really need to review based on median values that you would find, and based on the entire bill of materials that you've built out so far." AI already attaches emission factors to it. So it kind of makes that job of finding that emission factor a lot faster and easier. And then your job is only to go in and review and make sure that you're satisfied with what has been selected. Here is where I would also say that if you need the support of an analyst, you can ask for that. And instead of paying for an analyst conducting your entire assessment, you can pay for a few hours of expert assistance. And it makes the whole process a lot more cost effective and time effective also, I would say. and makes the ownership of the LCA, like it puts the ownership back in the hands of the company that wants to do the LCA. I'm going to go to the report now. Yeah, yeah, I'm going to take you to the report. And essentially, this is what it looks like. Now, this is what we've generated in the quick demo that honestly like took us maybe an hour at max to create on the back end. But it starts with just giving you an emission summary. Like, let's simplify it. What are the emissions you're generating? What's the benchmark generating, and what are your avoided emissions? Um, we have a difference in units over here, so just be mindful of that. We're talking about kilotons here, and we've got our avoided emissions in tons. Otherwise, in kilotons, it would have been too small to see. So the software already um, uh, has translated that to tons so that it's easier for you to parse. Um, all your analysis parameters. What's your goal and scope? What's your functional unit? What assessment framework are you using? All of that is already listed out here. We've got our life cycle overview. Um, Actually, I'm going to show you my favorite part of this, which is the sunburst chart. So typically, when you would look at impact, you would see something like this, where you'd say, "Oh, okay, if these are our emissions, orange is the ceramic tile that we're looking at, the yellow is the benchmark you're comparing with, and the blue is your avoided emissions." So you would typically see a graph like this, which would tell you that for different life cycle stages, um, are you doing better or worse than the benchmark? Um, but then you can also go into a waterfall chart, which talks, say, specifically about your avoided emissions, saying, oh, okay, you have more emissions in your raw materials. You're doing a little better in your manufacturing. It seems to be a little more sustainable. Your transportation and distribution, maybe you're doing local transport is lower, but here is the net total that you still need to abate. And the sunburst chart, the beauty of this, I feel, is that you're able to really deep dive into where these emissions are coming from. So I can pick and choose a benchmark here, which will show me a comparative analysis. And I can click and I can see, okay, what's the breakdown? Where are these emissions coming from? Um, we can also go beyond carbon and look at how we're doing in different impact categories. In this case, looks like our abiotic depletion is probably a category that needs a lot more attention. Um, we can this shows you what's included or excluded in the scope. It's in a nice like flowchart format. We have all the processes over here. We've applied a priority and a scope just to show you, um, say, what are the top three processes that you need to be focusing on. Um, I will dive into the hotspot analysis to show you that within all of these, okay, your majority of your impact in this case seems to be coming from pigment coatings, for example. Um, and yeah, you have a little bit of your analysis, which shows you here which scopes you need to work on. And as we had pointed out, scope three, majority of the times, is where most of your emissions lie. Um, I will jump into, there's a little bit of a conclusion, which will tell you what your impact overview is, how you're comparing with the benchmark, what are some insights to your impact strategy that you should focus on, say like top three things that are important for your organization, some challenges and rebounds that you could fall into. Like, is it even possible to abate all of these emissions, or are you in a fix because everything is scope three and kind of out of your control? So this is what the conclusion is for. makes it very easy to share with, say, investors or customers, a very quick summary. And we have our annexes and bibliography to show you where this information is coming from. So, in a nutshell, there's a lot of good stuff here. I think it's a matter of doing it with real data, which will give you a lot of like granular insight into where you can reduce your emissions. And yeah, it's a tool that's super quick, very accessible, and we're very excited to share it with everyone. So please give us a shout out if you'd want to uh, use it, try it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we stress is that these are always iterative processes. And so one of the things I really like about the reporting that's possible with the tool is that even if you don't have the highest data quality going into the process, you are now equipped for exactly that kind of supplier engagement that we've been talking about. So no longer are you like, this is the fixed static number that comes from an estimate, but now you have detail into, let's say, the pigmentation process to go back and speak with suppliers and ask questions about what else is possible. And that's huge. That's extremely important and hasn't been possible in the same way without this. So we only have a couple of minutes left, and so I'll just run through this really, really quickly, and then we'll dive into the Q&A. Um, but I do think that, we get asked a lot of questions about the compliance component, stronger scope three, um, emissions reporting and disclosures. You can improve your internal decision making, strengthen your sustainability narrative, and absolutely that transparency with your supply chain and being able to speak to folks more intelligently about what's going on with the product is extremely important. Um, and yeah, I mean, this should be beyond a reporting exercise. So definitely get in touch with us if you would like more information. And just with these last couple of minutes, I'll try to dive into some of the questions that we got. Of course, if we didn't get to something today that you would like for us to cover, please reach out, send us a note, and we can talk through the Q&A. And forgive me, I'm just going to stop sharing for a sec here so I can pull up the questions. Okay, so the first question that we got uh, pertains to how can Greenplaces help digitize data from collected invoices? And obviously, this is true for any of the data that you're collecting, but what we say is that we are agnostic about the data that you provide. We get so many complaints from clients who are frustrated that they have to distill things down into a template. And obviously, ClimatePoint was hearing the same thing. And so you don't need to organize your data into a particular format in order for us to be able to use it. Send us what you have. Again, iterative process. We can always help you improve. You'll get better data. You'll get better results with better data. And that does start with the way that you collect it, improving systems. And this was a big part of what I was doing at SAH, is just organizing the collection process. But that's absolutely something that we can help you with. So we'll ingest invoices, utility bills, spreadsheets, PDFs. I've gotten a lot of handwritten notes from foreign countries. The only thing we ask is that things be in English, or we'll work out a translation process. But happy to connect with anyone who wants to see the process up close and go into more detail. And obviously, you just got a deep dive into the demo of how that would work for LCAs. The next question we received was, how do we decide which impacts to focus on for our product and business? And Shamata, I'd love for you to jump in here as well. But what I will say is just we do like to start where the impact is biggest, and where you actually have the ability to leverage or change something. And the reason I flagged the first part, talking about impact, is purely that if you're only going to make a very, very small dent, but you do have a lot of control, that also isn't where I would look to help you prioritize. You need to look at where there's a nexus between the two. So we do recommend starting with hotspot analysis, high level review of your value chain, shows you where emissions are concentrated, and for manufacturers, more of that 80% impact sits in just 20% of your activities. So your raw materials, a lot of the detail that's going to need to go into a life cycle assessment and information you'll get out of a life cycle assessment. Shama, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered it. That's exactly what I would say as well.
Okay, great. And the last question we got was around free tools. Obviously, what we're talking about today is paid support here. And so I think we're both in pretty strong agreement that there are free tools available for you to do baseline calculations. I recommend you go and check them out. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol has a free calculation tool for Scope 3. OpenLCA has a free open source platform that you can use. Um, there's some spend-based estimates available in a free tier with Climatic. Um, we can set up more resources. But the caution I'll offer here is that, especially sort of early stages of our company, we're getting a lot of initial inputs from these free tools, and it's very unlikely that they're accurate to the degree that's going to let you do much. They're relying on spend-based estimates. They're trying to do something quick, give you, a rough focus somewhere to get started. And I do think it's good to play around with those and sort of get a sense of what you're working with. But if you're trying to make business decisions, you should spend the time to really understand your inputs and the impact. Um, okay, we're at time. Thank you all for joining us today. We'll make sure that we send this out for all of those of you who weren't able to join us today, but have signed up for the recording. Thank you again so much for joining us. And Shamata, thank you so much to you and to the ClimatePoint team. We're thrilled to be working together. And hope everyone has a lovely rest of their week. Thanks all.